Many Canadians are having a very difficult time. At what point do you reach out to get help with some debt relief? That's our topic today on the Debt Matters podcast. I'm Wayne Kay, and this show is all about helping Canadians find solutions to their debt with licensed insolvency trustees from across Canada. So coming up on the show today, when should you seek debt relief? If you use credit cards, are there some warning signs that we need to be aware of? If things start to go bad, what are some of the things that we can do? To help us through this, Mark Marshall is joining me from Allen Marshall and Associates in New Brunswick. Two offices, one in St. John, the other in Moncton. Mark, thanks for being here.
Wayne, thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure. We always get into some great discussions. And these days, last show we did, we were talking about how tough it is for so many Canadians. Are they kind of predicting that we're going to see more people maybe doing consumer proposals and maybe doing bankruptcies than we've seen in the last while?
Well, there's been a lot of indicators to say that the things are going to be kind of moving in that direction. The price of everything, inflation, interest rates are up. I know, looking at kind of industry and insider information, there is talks that there will be, more insolvencies across the country. I don't think we're to the point where we're seeing the same amount of insolvencies that we saw in the pre-pandemic era at this point in time. But I suspect that with all of the factors that I mentioned, that there's a strong possibility that we're going to be, people or Canadians are going to find themselves seeking out the services of an insolvency trustee to kind of to get their financial affairs in order.
So why is that? Why did we have more before the pandemic? I would have thought we'd actually have more during the pandemic, but was that because the government was just handing out money?
I think the government was handing out money, and the collectors stopped collecting. I mean, the big drivers, Revenue Canada, the banks, the credit card companies, everybody kind of took a back seat. They kind of pulled back to allow people, the options to kind of breathe or make payment arrangements or defer payments. And so I think, those programs, provided people with enough time and relief, that they could avoid the inevitable. And some people with those relief programs were able to kind of get their affairs in order on their own. Others not. But as the pandemic has kind of wound down and interest rates have started to kind of creep up, and as the banks are starting to get back into the business again and collections, I think that the numbers will start to increase, but there was a dip during that period.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we talk about a lot of Canadians maybe getting into financial trouble. Does it often start in credit cards?
Credit cards are usually a big indicator of somebody having some issues because, credit is both convenient, but it can also be, a struggle for people because if you're using credit cards, for basic everyday purchases, the interest on those cards can be crippling. And a lot of people don't recognize, or they don't read the fine print, is that they're just looking to say, look, I'm short this month, so I need to rely on something. So they'll rely on their credit card. And then if they're unable to pay the balance off on that credit card, then the credit card interest would go from, let's say, whatever a standard credit card interest payment might be 12%. And it could, without it being paid off, the fine print would say is that now the interest rate's going to be 29%. And so the payments that they're making the request for you to make are generally interest only, right? Or service charges only. And so it becomes to the point where it becomes unmanageable. And really credit, the management of credit, you should be looking at, what's the benefits? What's the long-term benefit of having credit? So, credit should be used for things like purchasing a car, right? So something that you need, something that you would find some difficulty in saving up the money. That car gives you benefit. It gets you to work. It gets you where you need to be, versus saying using a credit card to pay for a vacation, which would be short-term, pleasure, long-term payment plan that provides you with no return on that investment. So credit cards can be difficult, right? If you're using them for everyday stuff, if you're unable to pay them off every month, you're going to find yourself in a difficult spot.
So if you do have that high credit card, should you be contacting the bank and saying, okay, what are my options? Can I move it over to, a line of credit or something?
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in asking those questions because it's sometimes the fine print on those credit card agreements are so small and that you don't recognize is that, your interest rate's going to climb to the point where it's unmanageable. So while your credit's in good shape and while the payments are kind of in a manageable zone, it may not hurt to call the bank and have that discussion with them to say, look, would I qualify for a line of credit that would be maybe 1 or 2 points above prime that I can pay off these loans, or would I qualify for consolidation loan to get these credit cards paid off? It would never hurt to ask those questions, because what's the worst? What's the worst that they're going to say is no, and the possibility is that they may say yes, and then if they do say yes, you got to look and say, okay, what's it going to cost me? What's the interest rate? What's the payment going to be? And then, anytime you apply for a consolidation loan or a line of credit to pay off credit cards, the number one thing you have to do is you got to dispose of those credit cards, because people will do it is they will clear those credit cards off and they'll obtain new debt to do it. And then what they'll do is they'll use those credit cards and now have a zero balance,
right,
as a convenience card again. And then the next thing you know, 6 months, year from now, you've got double the debt load.
There is nothing freer than not having a credit card bill. And I know we're supposed to use our credit cards so that we can get the points, but I personally can't stand that. I just like not there's certain things obviously I have to have a credit card for, and it has to get billed, but it's a freedom not using it.
Yeah, it is. And not getting that or getting that credit card statement every month and having a zero balance owing on it.
Yeah.
Like that's the best feeling.
You open it up sometimes and you paid it and you open it and it says zero and you're like, wow, like it just feels good. And then it is encouraging to you to kind of continue on that path. It's a weird psychology that happens with debt. The more in debt you are, the more you're like, I'm in debt anyway. I'll put a couple more dollars on the credit card. But as you start to get out of the debt, then you start to say, I'm not going for that coffee. Like, it's really a weird psychology.
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's one of those things is that some people too, like as you were saying, is they get farther in debt, they'll think, I'm going to leave my money in the bank account, my bank. I'm not going to spend my money. I'm just going to use this credit card for that coffee or for that purchase. And they, for some reason in their mind's eye, they believe that they've got more money in the account in doing that until the credit card statement shows up.
Yeah. So at what point do you realize there's a problem? What are some of the signs?
Some of the big signs would be is that if you're using credit cards to cover day-to-day expenses or month-to-month expenses, such as utility bills or things that are kind of popping up, or if you're using credit cards, to supplement your monthly income because you're short. I mean, that's one, is that a bit of a telltale sign is that you don't have a handle on your fixed expenses and you're potentially spending more money on your fixed expenses and your variable expenses than you have coming in. So you're using your credit card, to supplement. Another telltale sign is that, are you making a payment on that credit card? Is it just the minimum payment, right? Because if it is just the minimum payment, then you're basically, the bank's they're profiting off you because you're making that minimum interest payment and it's a service charge and they're making the money and they lend money to make money. So, if utilities are being threatened to cut off, or if you have, creditors calling you saying that you need to pay more, or they're harassing you, or they're threatening legal action, I mean, those would be all kind of telltale signs that you're kind of running into a little bit of financial difficulty. And I mean, again, I'm hoping that answers your question, but it's warning signs of financial difficulty. Overusing your credit cards and not having the income to support it.
Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you get to that point, then what do you do when you know things are now bad? You're not sleeping, you're stressed out, relationship is in trouble, because anybody who's going through this, it is so hard to be in a happy, positive place. You know that things are bad. What do you do? Where do you go?
Well, I mean, you reach out to a professional, reach out to, a licensed insolvency trustee, like, someone at our office. And what you do is, in having that discussion with a trustee, is it's not going to cost you anything to know your options. And you explain what's going on. They'll review your, as a trustee, I'll review your income, or we'll review your debt load. We'll look at, what options are available to you. And again, worst case scenario is that someone may have to consider the possibility of a personal bankruptcy. Or they may look at the possibility of a consumer proposal where they can pay back a portion of their debt without the interest being, charged. It can be as simple as putting together a proper budget. Someone may feel that they're kind of lost, or they're spiraling down, but it's just a proper budget to get you back on track. Might just, again, in speaking to a professional that does this on a daily basis, could provide you with enough knowledge that you could kind of navigate, some of the financial difficulties on your own. And again, knowing your options, when it's free of charge to do it, what's the harm?
Mm-hmm. Okay. One thing that we did years ago, and it turned out to be one of the best things that we did, was we looked at our yearly expenses, every little bill that came up, and then we divided it by 26 to fit in each of the pay periods. And then we started setting that money into a separate account, so that for the first time ever, we would actually have that money to pay the next bill that came up. And it was a game changer.
Takes some discipline, though.
Well, it was, but it's better than being in debt and looking at that horrible credit card bill, because that's what would happen was we didn't have the extra money because, got young kids. And so then you'd use your credit card and then you have to pay the credit card. So we were making the payment anyway, but we were doing it reverse. And it was just to be able to do it for the first time. Yes, it was very difficult for the first 3 months, but we really had to figure out where there was going to be some extra cash, had to do some extra work, just to try to build this up. And then it changed.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes sense. It makes sense. And again, those unexpected expenses, like the vehicle registrations, those things that kind of pop up once a year that you fail to kind of recognize in your monthly budget. But if you can, like you say, if you take a 12-month approach to it, and like you say, dividing it by 26, because generally most people are paid bi-weekly, then you can start to kind of map out your plan.
Yeah, I have to share that. I want to tell everybody about this, because once we figured it out and got to that little point, as I said, it really was a game changer for our whole family, and just it was just a wonderful relief to when you get that car insurance, or whatever it was that was once a year that you'd have to pay this. It's like those are the things that can often throw families off kilter for a little bit financially.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's those unexpected expenses. And if you've not taken the time to build up either an emergency fund or that you've budgeted for, those expenses, then you a lot of times will have to rely on credit or credit cards or lines of credit to make those payments. And like you said earlier, is that you're going to end up paying that anyway. So if you can get to the point where you're budgeting for it and paying for it out of your monthly cash flow versus trying to find it, or put on a line of credit or a credit card, you'll be better for it if you can do it that way.
Right. Okay. So things go sideways. You kind of have the consumer proposal, of the worst case scenario, or the bankruptcy that you mentioned. What do those look like briefly?
Well, like a bankruptcy, you're required to report to you're going to be required, like ultimately with the bankruptcy is that you're getting rid of all of your unsecured debt. So your credit cards, your lines of credit, those types of things. You're able to maintain payments on secured creditors, which would be like a car or, like a travel trailer or a house, items that you in theory need to keep or maintain your lifestyle, but they're secured debt. So you continue to make the payments on those, and then you're required to report to the trustee about what you're earning. You're required to keep track of what you're doing on a month-to-month basis and report to the trustee about what you're doing with your expenses. You're required to do 2 counseling sessions. In a consumer proposal, the creditors agree to the offer, whatever you propose, and that would be reviewed with the trustee. But you make the offer and you say, here's what we can afford to do to pay towards the unsecured debt. You can establish what you want to do with your secured creditors again. So if you want to maintain the house payments and the car payments, which of course you'll need, you lay those out in your proposal. You're required to do 2 counseling sessions. And then if the creditors agree to your offer, then you make that monthly payment. And then the plan with any trustee, whether it's in a proposal or bankruptcy, is to help you establish through those counseling programs good money management skills to allow you to keep track, to establish good shopping habits, to set some goals, to establish budgets, learn how to use credit on a go-forward basis, know what you're doing when it comes to credit, and then ultimately find yourself moving forward debt-free, but in a position that you're not going to find yourself in the same spot again. And there's lots of resources to look at. Like, I would recommend any of your listeners that are here, if even if they're not considering a proposal or bankruptcy, but they just want to look for budgeting resources. If you visit our website, it's www.wecanhelp.ca. There's lots of information in there. There's lots of FAQs that people might ask about finances. There's lots of information there. There's lots of resources in terms of budgeting and managing.
That's great advice. And these are things, it's there. We just need to go find it, and it can make all the difference. And I wish this was all taught in school. I really do. It's sad.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
I don't understand why it's not. I know you look at a lot of the life, not to get off topic, but a lot of the life skills that are taught, the home ec of the world, and those things, they had kind of taken a bit of a backseat in the education system. They're starting to kind of wind themselves back up again. People are starting to see them, but I know finances would be something that a lot of people would gain a lot of knowledge, or like a lot of benefit from the knowledge that of managing day-to-day personal finances.
Oh yeah, it would be fantastic. Mark, any final advice you want to share with us today?
The only thing I would say is, if you're struggling, reach out to an insolvency trustee, have a discussion. If there's struggle on your end, really don't worry, don't sit back and let the stress get at you. Ask questions, see what options are available to you. And again, whatever option you decide ultimately will be your decision as the debtor on kind of how you approach things. But, knowledge, you can't go wrong with it. You can't go wrong with knowing your options.
Absolutely. Mark, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Okay, Wayne, thank you.
Well, once again, my guest today was Mark Marshall. You can learn more or schedule a free consultation with Alan Marshall and Associates, licensed insolvency trustees, by going to the website wecanhelp.ca. wecanhelp.ca. And that's it for today's Debt Matters podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts from. And of course, for more information, you can always check out debtmatters.ca. Thanks for listening.